Hello, baby. Wake up.
Are you recording?
Yeah, of course.
Good. The baby is podcasting.
Say something.
Say something, Sammy. Tell the world what you think.
This is a boring podcast, Sam, if you don't talk. All right, everyone, warm up those brains. It's time once again for the Get More Smarter podcast. This one is episode 229. I'm Jason Bain.
I'm Ian Silveria. This week on the Get More Smarter podcast, new polling shows Americans are already sick of Trump 2.0. Will shutting down FiveThirtyEight so nobody can get a good polling average help or hurt the 45th and 47th president and his flagging ratings? Then, the White House is controlled by Republicans, the Senate is controlled by Republicans, the House of Representatives is controlled by Republicans, and the New York Times asks, why won't Democrats stop the government shutdown? Next, there is some real pain in store for the constituents of our favorite bread sandwich congressman from Colorado's 3rd congressional district. Will he stand with the tens of thousands of people in his district who have health care because of Medicaid expansion? Or will he side with Musk and Trump to kick them off their insurance and doom their rural hospitals into bankruptcy? Finally, we check in with the most anti-family political party in the country, the Colorado Republicans. But first, he was the first officially announced candidate for Colorado Attorney General, the Boulder County District Attorney, and a former deli worker, otherwise known as Colorado's Harvey Dent, but just with one face. Michael Dougherty joins us to talk about his campaign to be the state's top cop. Take a listen. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, technically returning to the Get More Smarter podcast, Boulder County District Attorney and first official announced candidate for Attorney General of Colorado in the 2026 election, Michael Dougherty. Michael worked in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for 12 years, becoming Deputy Chief of the Sex Crimes Unit, think CSI stuff, before moving to Colorado in 2010 to head up the Colorado DNA Justice Review Project in the Attorney General's office under then-Republican AG John Suthers. He then quickly rose to lead the criminal justice section under Suthers and then ran for Attorney General in 2018 before successfully seeking an appointment to then-Governor John Hickenlooper to replace dad of friend of the show, Stan Garnett. Dougherty has served for 7 years as Boulder's DA and handled some pretty high-profile cases, which we'll get into shortly here. But enough of me. Michael Dougherty, welcome to the Get More Smarter podcast.
Well, hello. It's great to see both of you, and I'm excited to be back on. Thanks for having me on today.
Ian and I have both joked that you remind us of Harvey Dent, the district attorney from Batman, but
like without the whole supervillain two faces thing, just the one face. Yeah.
I appreciate that distinction. I will say, when I succeeded Stan Garnett as district attorney, he told me I would be recognized in the community all the time. I didn't believe it when I first heard it, but he was absolutely right. But there was a time where I was recognized by someone in the coffee shop who kept looking at me, and I assumed it was going to be the usual, wait, aren't you the district attorney? And the guy finally comes up to me and says, you look so much like the district attorney. And I start to nod, and he goes, from Batman, Harvey Dent.
Awesome. See, you're straight out of Central Casting as the unflappable prosecutor character. Was this a career you always wanted, or was there a time where you were like selling insurance or something?
I've not sold insurance. I've had a variety of jobs. I was loading trucks at UPS, working at a deli, different things throughout my career as a young person. And then ultimately I went to law school knowing I wanted to go into public service. I worked for a year as a paralegal at a law firm in Midtown Manhattan, which was a great experience, but more than anything, solidified my deep commitment to working on behalf of the community. So I went to law school with that in mind. I interned with public defender's offices, actually, all 3 years of law school. But I had a professor who to this day is a mentor and friend of mine who convinced me that if I found the right prosecutor's office, the mission would be to do justice and do the right thing. Not to rack up convictions like notches in a gun belt, but really to seek justice every day. And he was absolutely right, and that became a very fulfilling and meaningful career for me, and it's what I've been doing ever since.
So now you're running for AG, and every candidate says they make their decision to run for office sort of independently of the environment or other potential candidates or whatever, and we know this is like rarely true because you have to consider every factor when you make a big decision like this. To what degree was it important for you to be the first candidate announced for this race?
Well, I will say it symbolizes and reflects my deep commitment to the Attorney General's office and my passion and understanding for the impact and importance of that office throughout the state of Colorado. And I would point out to you that I moved to Colorado to work for the Attorney General's office. So at the time, my family was living in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and we were working at the Manhattan DA's office. That's where my wife and I met. It's a good episode of Law and Order, so to speak. But we met there, but we came to Colorado because at the time, John Suthers, the then Attorney General, had launched a really innovative project to look for wrongful convictions in the state. And we moved to Boulder. We moved to Colorado for that project and the opportunity to head it up. So I know from then leading the criminal justice section and being at the leadership table at the Attorney General's office, the important role the AG plays, not just in public safety, but also consumer protection, water, environment, and so on. I will say when Donald Trump was elected in November, my wife looked at me. We were on the couch watching the results come in, and she looked at me and says, "Now you have to run." So that was a major push for my not only recognizing the importance of the AG's office, but also embracing that now more than ever, we need people with trial experience and leadership experience to stand up and fight against the Trump and Musk administration when appropriate.
Okay, so I like how you put that, the Trump and Musk administration. This is how we talk about it, too, because it is very obvious that, like, there's not just one guy calling the shots around here.
Right.
And I would argue that it appears to be an inverse order, where Musk seems to be calling a lot more shots than Trump does. Trump seems to want to be, president in name only, go golfing, take meetings, have dinners, go to fundraisers, and Musk is the one kind of calling the shots. Is that your assessment of the situation, too?
Well, I don't think you're wrong. What I would say is Musk is far more involved than anybody would ever anticipate. Someone who's not been elected to office making decisions at the federal level.
What can be done about this? Like, just right now. There's all these people online saying, why aren't Democrats doing more? The Attorney General, Phil Weiser, friend of the show, has filed a ton of lawsuits, including one today, to stop the dismantling of the Department of Education. There are moves being made, but, do you think the opposition from Democrats right now is sufficient, or are there other things that can be being done, other tools in the toolbox?
Well, candidly, out of the gate, I think a lot of Democrats were caught flat-footed by what the Trump and Musk administration were doing. I do appreciate Phil Weiser and his staff working hard to make sure that we're picking and choosing the right battles against the Trump administration. And by that, I mean, it's not simply about going on cable TV or putting things on social media to score political points. We have to be really judicious in deciding what battles do we want to take the federal government to court on, where can we win, and making those decisions based on principle and the rule of law. And thus far, Phil Weiser and his team have been successful in each one of the lawsuits they filed in stopping the Trump and Musk administration from taking actions that would directly harm Colorado. I'm committed to doing that. I've been a fighter my entire career, and that's what we need in the Attorney General's office right now. I do think the AGs, to your question, Ian, play a really key and pivotal role, more importantly than ever, in taking on the Trump and Musk administration. But that goes for all elected officials. I think it's a time to act for all of us and to be really thoughtful but aggressive in what we're doing to protect Coloradans.
Before we get more into that, I want to ask you a couple of political things because we're also a political podcast. I mean that from the standpoint of campaigns. You were a candidate for AG in the 2018 cycle before you were appointed to the Boulder DA vacancy. Are there things that you did or didn't do when you look back at that experience that you're definitely going to change this time around?
In terms of the campaign, Jason?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's a great question. What I would highlight, and you know this, but I would highlight for your listeners, is that at the time I ran for Attorney General, I was the second in command for the District Attorney's Office for Jefferson and Gilpin counties. I've learned a tremendous amount as a candidate, but also as an elected official since then, including the last 7 years as the District Attorney for Boulder County. From that experience, though, in that campaign, I certainly learned firsthand the importance of getting all around Colorado. If you're going to be the people's lawyer and you're going to represent the people of this great state, it's more than just traveling the I-25 corridor. It's about getting out to communities because we have, in terms of interest and issues, a really diverse state. And making sure we're out there listening, answering questions, and then engaging to help people all throughout the state of Colorado, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of where they live, just doing the right thing. So I certainly learned that. And as an elected official, I've learned a lot about how to lead large law offices and what it means to lead teams through particularly difficult cases and how to fight for the right results in those cases.
So nuts and bolts of campaigns, there's fundamental things that kind of never change. There's always improvements in technology or outreach. Have you noticed anything that shifted majorly since 2018? I mean, it's not quite 10 years ago, but the technology, the tactics, the strategies kind of improve? Are you doing anything more innovative this time around?
I do think there have been changes, a lot more digital campaigning perhaps than even just 7 or 8 years ago. So when I ran for district attorney, I was appointed and then ran in the same year, 2018.
Right.
It was a hotly contested primary. That was about getting all around Boulder County and connecting with people in person. We're starting to go back to more in-person events, but I still think there's a lot of emphasis on Zoom, digital media, meeting with people online, and so on. One of the
Coming
highlights.
on big, important podcasts.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So this would be a highlight and an example of some of the changes. But what I was actually going to say is when I was running in 2018, I just wanted to connect with people wherever they were. So I started going to events that were off the beaten path. And one of those events, for example, was the Longmont Roller Derby. And just walking around the roller derby meeting people, they were all surprised I was there. And in all seriousness, what that developed for me was, as district attorney, being out in the community nights, weekends, you name it. We're out in the community all the time. Because at a time where people have a lack of trust, I mean, the amount of trust people have in government and the justice system is an all-time low. That's not true here in Boulder County for our office. We've garnered a lot of public support from the community we serve, and part of that's because we're getting out and talking to people and answering their questions and addressing their concerns.
So back to electoral political stuff for a sec here. Before the 2018 election, we didn't quite know that the bottom had truly fallen out for Republicans statewide. And then Democrats swept every office in a landslide in 18 and then in 2022. And as of this recording, we couldn't even name a possible Republican AG candidate for 2026. Seems like the primary is the election this time around. The diplomatic answer to this question is that you always run like you're 10 points behind, but the truth is that the winner of the June 2026 primary will almost certainly go on to win the general election. How does that change your approach?
Well, I think you're right. I'm not going to give you the political answer. I think you're right about that. The landscape may change. I mean, the landscape's changed around the country, but here in Colorado, I would anticipate it's going to come down to the primary in large part. That's one of the reasons that I launched the campaign when I did. Because it's a long runway, but when you think about it being June of 2026 as opposed to November, that's still really important, obviously, right? I'm not going to discount what may happen between June and November, but really being focused on the primary was a reason that I jumped out early in this campaign so people know how committed I am and how passionate I am about the Attorney General's office. But one thing I would add, Ian, is I'm really honored to have the support of Republican district attorneys, not just Democratic district attorneys, but Republican DAs. And I'll share with you, one of them said to me, I'm going to endorse you, I'm going to support you, but you don't want my endorsement because you don't want the R on you. And I said, you know what? I think the country is sick and tired of this divisiveness. I certainly just want to be true to who I am, and I think people want to see us able to agree on things, including the mission and commitment to doing justice.
I think you're right, and A.G. Weiser always had Cynthia Kaufman's support, former Republican AG as well. That never hurt him; it only helped him. So I tend to agree with you.
Having been part of a campaign for DA a long time ago myself, I know that some primary voters, well, voters in general, have trouble differentiating between a DA and an attorney general. What should voters be looking for in an AG?
Well, first and foremost, it's a commitment to doing the right thing, to doing justice for all Coloradans, and making decisions based on the rule of law and based on principle, not based on politics. And I'm absolutely committed to that, and that's what I've been doing for the last 27 years as a prosecutor. Also, as Attorney General, I would have the responsibility of not only standing up for public safety, consumer protection, and the environment, but also representing all the state agencies. A lot of people are unaware that the Attorney General's office plays an incredibly important and influential role in guiding state policy through their representation of state agencies on legal matters.
You're their lawyer.
Right, exactly right. So I'm not only the people's lawyer, if I have the honor of being elected Attorney General, I'm the lawyer for the state agencies and for the governor. And obviously, I don't have to take every case that's presented. It's a question first of if it's the right thing to do and if the conduct was constitutional and not in violation of the law. But once I go through that analysis, I have to represent the state. So that's an important role the Attorney General plays that doesn't get as much attention as the other parts of the job.
What would you say are the most urgent legal or policy challenges facing Colorado that the next AG has to deal with?
First and foremost, right now, it's Trump and Musk, for the reasons we've talked about. It's the steps they're taking that are actually going to harm Coloradans, harm our workers, harm our environment, and standing up and fighting in court and winning those fights. That's critically important, and that's why trial experience and leadership experience matters more than ever in our next Attorney General. And that's what I'm going to bring to that office.
I want to dig into that for a second, because like something that unfortunately has become apparent is like, not like they should necessarily, but the court doesn't have a military. They don't have a police force. The enforcement of court orders really does kind of hang on norms in many ways, unfortunately. Does that bother you at all? This is something that we're seeing online and hearing from some activist folks that like, well, it doesn't even matter if we sue them and win because they're not going to follow court orders anyway. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say, first of all, thankfully, they have followed court orders. And it'll be it'll be a dark
No,
day.
they have been curtailed a few times. It's true. Like, yeah. And the most recent overreach, they're getting slapped back, and then they're reacting, right? They're not just pushing forward continuously.
Right. It'll be a dark day in this country if the presidential administration stops following court orders. There are sanctions that could be handed down by courts, and I would anticipate that happening if the federal government fails to follow or comply with a court order. Thus far, they have not. So, for example, on the birthright citizenship issue, which is a constitutional right, of course, the Trump administration sought to revoke that right in blatant violation of the U.S. Constitution. In fact, the federal judge who first reviewed it, and there have now been 5, all of whom put an injunction on the federal government's action or desire to take action. That federal judge, he was appointed by Reagan
Right.
40 years ago, and he said it's the most unconstitutional act he's ever seen in his entire career on the bench. But he and other judges have put blocks in place, the injunctions in place to stop the Trump administration's most aggressive and harmful actions. But I would highlight for you that the only reason the judges were in a position to do so is because we had attorneys general around the country who had the strength and the willingness and the commitment to fight for what was right.
Does the amount of time you have to devote to just protecting Colorado from crazy shit out of the White House change how you would organize your office?
It's a good question. My hope would be at some point things calm down a little bit at the federal level, but each day that seems more and more unlikely. I do think you need to have a large staff of really talented trial attorneys, and that's where leading a law office and being successful in that is a really important qualification for this job. The AG's office currently has 400 attorneys. It's by far the largest law office in Colorado.
Yeah.
And having been a leader in the Manhattan DA's office, where I was responsible for the day-to-day management of the office, we had 1,300 people there. When you have hundreds of people, and Phil Weiser's done a great job bringing on really talented staff, when you have talented staff, you're able to be a force multiplier. So my hope would be it's not just about Trump and Musk, because Colorado still has our own challenges and our own opportunities to continue to improve as a state on consumer protection, housing, and environmental issues, and public safety. I want to make sure we have people devoted to those as well, and I'm committed to it.
There's so many things that could be pushed back on, and many of them AG Weiser may yet get to. Are there other things that you're looking at, you personally, that you'd like to see legal action taken sooner rather than later, as it's feasible?
So there have been some actions. The ones that Phil Weiser has taken are all ones that I agree with and fully support, and I'm not surprised that the courts have put a halt to it. So Phil and his office have been successful in each one of those actions. I think we need to be thoughtful going forward about only taking on the ones that are actually harming Colorado. I anticipate there being further actions by the federal government that fall in that category, but I don't think Phil's missed any up to this point.
Right.
So back in 2018, Republicans tried to knock Phil for not having experience as a prosecutor. They did the whole professor thing, didn't work. As we've seen in the years since, wasn't an issue, which, as you point out, he's been a great prosecutor. He's done a great job in the courtroom, and he's picked the right battles and won almost all of them, if not all of them. Experience in a courtroom is certainly a benefit. So how has your trial and courtroom experience shaped your approach to legal advocacy?
Well, this may sound obvious, but I don't think you can lead people if you don't know how to do the job yourself. So when it comes to leading a large law office, your advice falls on deaf ears. You don't have the ability or knowledge to inspire or lead the staff if you haven't actually done the job yourself. I always think back to, I worked at a deli a million years ago for 5 years, including through community college. And at that deli, I had 2 bosses, both of whom would scream and yell at me and the rest of the crew that worked there. but I had great respect for one, and that's because he did the job as well as, if not better than any of us. And that's how I've always sought to be as a leader. And in every office I've been in as a leader, I've continued to handle cases. Where that's really important, for example, is I responded on behalf of the Attorney General John Suthers to the Aurora movie theater shooting.
Right.
Responded on behalf of my office, our community, to the Marshall Fire and helped lead that investigation. And as you know, unfortunately, tragically, had to respond to the King Soopers in South Boulder and then led the prosecution of that case, including the entire law enforcement investigation. So that experience, I think, is absolutely critical in being able to legally analyze cases, make decisions, and then inspire staff to fight for the right result.
So since you brought up the tragic Boulder shooting, you were the DA in Boulder during one of the darker times in our state's history. Unfortunately, not an uncommon thing for us here in Colorado. It was March 22nd, 2021, shooting at King Soopers that took the lives of 10 people. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience taught you about crisis management and being a focal point for holding a community together?
Sure. So a couple things come to mind. First, the day of getting the call out is something I'll always remember. And then having to talk to the community through the media and trying to help people understand what had happened and what we were going to do about it, including my deep and tireless commitment to getting justice in the case. Once we knew the shooter had survived the interaction and the arrest with law enforcement, we knew it was going to be my responsibility to get justice in that case. That night, the night of the mass murders, standing at Boulder Police Department in front of 130 law enforcement investigators and talking about our commitment to securing the right outcome in the case and what that was going to require, and then working every day and every night with those investigators for the next several weeks and leading that large team to a point where we got the right outcome in the case after trial. I think the trial skills are an important part of it, but also just the leadership experience. And more than anything, to your question, Ian, it taught me about, or reminded me about, the resilience and strength of community. Not just the day of, not just in the days that followed, but all through and including the trial. So even at trial, I'll share with you, I came back from court the first day of the trial, and we had about 70 people, family members and loved ones, who would gather in our large training room, 70 people in there. And I walked in, and there was a huge spread of food in the front of the room. And I turned to my assistant, and I said, "What's with the food?" And she said it was from a restaurant in our community. Every day there was food there from community. We had community members who showed up from the very beginning all the way through the end of the trial. And to me, as a prosecutor, I've seen a lot of horrific things. I've handled some really terrible cases. But I've always looked at the response that we have as a community, because I think that really reflects on who we are as a people. More than the horrific acts, the evil acts of one person, it's how we as a community respond. And unfortunately, it's to these tragedies. But we also developed a protocol for helping the victims and their families through the case that's going to be used, unfortunately, when we have another tragedy here in Colorado. That template worked really well for us in supporting the victims. So I definitely learned a lot from going through that experience. But it was a true honor to fight for justice on behalf of the victims and their families in that case, and to lead the large teams involved to get to the right result.
What do you think that taught you about yourself personally? Because that's a life-changing experience, I imagine.
It's a good question. So about myself personally, it helped me reflect on the importance of being a leader, being calm in moments of tragedy, being able to lead through a crisis. If I'm the one crying, if I'm the one who's unable to get off the floor, then who's going to do the work? I knew those things from throughout my career, handling sex crimes and homicides, but taking on the responsibility and letting the emotions become the energy that drove me to get the right result and drove me to continue to see the case through the really significant challenges presented by the state hospital and the mental health system in Colorado. And then personally, just the value of team. I mean, it wasn't just me. We had a great team on that case, really outstanding public servants who I'm going to be forever grateful to. The victim advocates, the staff of the office, we had another prosecutor who tried the case with me. Those teammates made that outcome possible. So I think just reinforcing a lot of what I know from my career, having worked as a prosecutor and handled cases in court my entire career, those things were known to me, but certainly King Soopers reinforced it. I'll share with you the morning after it happened. At 5 a.m. I got home, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, and I was just trying to wolf down some food before I would head back to the office. And my wife asked me what I was going to do. And I just said the two things I do well. I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can, and I'm going to seek the right result. And that guided me all throughout the process, which took longer than it should have for everybody involved. But we got through it because of the team we had and the support of the community and the commitment we had to the victims.
There was a recent study that found that 1 in 15 people in the United States have a direct connection to a mass shooting as a victim themselves or because they know someone who was a victim. If you could somehow focus all of your efforts on this one issue, like reducing gun violence, where do you start?
So we do focus a lot of my energy on reducing gun violence. So I will share with you that on Monday night of this week, I was with Moms Demand Action in Louisville, speaking at their meeting about extreme risk protection orders and trying to raise awareness around how people can go to court to seek the court's intervention when someone's a risk to themselves or to others. Last week, I was the keynote speaker for another group that's working to reduce gun violence. And I talked about lessons learned from the King Soopers shooting and what we could do to further our efforts to reduce gun violence. One thing, Jason, that I feel really strongly about is pushing back on the political rhetoric or political divisiveness around efforts to reduce gun violence. So I always focus on a couple key things that I think people agree with. First, domestic violence offenders should not have access to guns. And when gun rights advocates push on me for whether it's something I say in public or a social media post, I will respond with, do you agree that domestic violence offenders should not have guns? No one's ever disagreed with that. And to me, that shows it's not an unfettered, unlimited constitutional right. We're just acknowledging right there are limits. Do you think a convicted felon should have access to guns? The answer, no. Do you think people who are going through a serious mental health crisis should have access to guns? Again, the answer is no. So if we have agreement in those areas, we could build off of that and not get caught in the political divide. But I'll share with you one practical example that I feel really excited about that we've done here in Boulder County is we've worked with nonprofit partners to purchase gun safes for cars and homes, and then we give them out for free at community events. So most recently was Veterans Day, November in Longmont. After the Veterans Day parade, we were set up in the park in Longmont. We gave out 200 gun safes in 1 hour.
Dang.
People were lined up all across the park. And they were shocked that we were giving them out for free, and they were shocked that the district attorney was there doing it himself.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
Right. They're definitely not cheap, and we need more support so we could do as many as possible. But that's about meeting gun owners in the middle, right? And not just making it this controversial, inflammatory issue that it is for so many people, but rather meeting people in the middle and saying, if that gun was unsecured the night before, this is a victory for all of us. Because so many of the shootings we have are with stolen guns. And we have needless tragedies in terms of suicides that happen far too often in the state of Colorado that are killing our young people. So if we get people to secure their guns properly and be responsible gun owners, we will see enhanced public safety. And that's the kind of effort that we've launched here in Boulder County. And I think it's something that we have to, and I promise you I will, take statewide if I have the honor of being elected Attorney General.
So the King Soopers case is obviously very high profile. You also handled the Marshall Fire case. I'd love to hear a couple stories about that if you're willing to share, and then any other notable cases that you'd like to tell listeners about.
Sure. So Marshall Fire, another incredibly difficult and tragic incident here in Boulder County. Over 1,000 homes were destroyed, some lives lost, a lot of pets were killed as well, and people's lives were just absolutely devastated. I got the call, and it was such a windy day. I remember it was during the holiday week. I was at work, but it was kind of quiet. And I stood up and looked out and saw the wind, and then got the email notification saying we need people to go right away to the emergency call center because a fire has started. Please come and staff the call center. So myself and members of our staff went over to the call center and worked the phone. And then I was working with the sheriffs and other leaders in the fire and law enforcement area around how the response was going to work. We were then asked to assist in leading the investigation along with the sheriff's office to help identify the cause and origin of the fire, which we worked tirelessly to get to that result. We've encountered a lot of obstacles along the way, but ultimately determined that two fires actually started, one on a property that this group 12 tribes was residing on, and then one from Excel down the road. And they were very close in proximity, and both those fires joined and then went on to destroy so many homes and so many lives, including a couple of people in my office who lost their homes in the fire. So we were deeply committed to getting the right result, working through it and seeing what caused that fire to start. And I worked really closely with the sheriff's office. We have a strong working relationship. So that's the Marshall Fire. And I think it's about keeping one's calm and one's sense of direction and commitment through a crisis, and then leading a staff and leading people to get the right result, whatever that's going to be based on the evidence, and not shying away from saying Excel started that second fire and their equipment malfunctioned, which was the cause. And we said that publicly, and I think that was important that people knew we were being transparent and that we were committed to reaching the right result. And then I've had other cases throughout my career. Very early on in my career as a young prosecutor, I was in downtown Manhattan on 9/11, and shortly after the attacks on the World Trade Center, a person was caught coming out of the rubble falsely claiming to have found survivors buried in the rubble. And that caused firefighters to go into the rubble, putting their lives at risk, and it was all a hoax.
Wow.
And I was asked to prosecute that case, and I took that case to trial. And it was an incredibly difficult trial in terms of picking a jury that had not been so impacted with emotion. I mean, the trial was taking place a few blocks from the World Trade Center, or where the World Trade Center had been, and they were still in recovery efforts. You still had to go past the National Guard to even get to the courthouse where we were going to try the case. So getting a jury and then fighting for the right result. And that was my first experience in dealing with first responders who had also suffered a loss in their work. Much like with King Soopers, where Officer Eric Talley was killed, and it had such an emotional, traumatic impact on the officers. The firefighters that I had as witnesses, there were 3 of them who went into the hole. They were 3 of 20 firefighters in a firehouse. They had lost 9 of their colleagues on 9/11. So for them, there was so much emotion involved in the trial. And I was a really very young prosecutor, so it was an honor to be entrusted with that case and to work on that case. But again, it taught me about using the emotion as energy and passion to get the right result, but not letting the emotion cloud my judgment or my ability to secure the right outcome.
What was I only ask because I'm sure people who are listening to this are going to wonder, what was the point of that? What was it, someone trying to just get attention, or?
I'm not 100% sure to this day, but he was either trying to get attention, that's definitely possible, and the crowd started chanting USA, USA after he came out of the hole and made his announcement.
Oh.
So it might have been that. He also had a history of thefts that he had committed. And beneath the World Trade Center, there was a shopping mall. In fact, that's where I used to do my last-minute Christmas shopping every year. We did have some incidents of looting and theft from the shopping mall after the attacks on 9/11. So it's possible he was down there for that. He never admitted why he did it.
Switching gears for a second, what do you think the role of the Attorney General should be in dealing with police reform, public safety, and accountability? There's obviously been a lot of moves legislatively in that direction after the murder of George Floyd in 2020. Now at the federal level, things are getting a little murky. People are talking about taking us backwards. Where do you see the AG's role in that in a state like Colorado?
Well, I will say you're right that at the federal level it's getting a little murky. What makes it even murkier to me is Donald Trump deciding to pardon individuals who assaulted police officers on January 6th. So it's
arresting protesters and then pardoning rioters feels very disorienting. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm not entirely sure which way it's heading, but I can tell you here in Colorado, we have to remain absolutely committed, as I've been throughout my career, to public safety. That has to be a top priority for the Attorney General. And we've seen during the pandemic crime levels go up and the role the Attorney General can and should play when it comes to public safety. But the only way we keep the public truly safe is if we have the trust of those that we serve. And that requires criminal justice reform. And we've done a lot in the state of Colorado. We've certainly done a lot here in Boulder County, but there's more work to be done. So when I look at some of the things we've put in place, so for example, I'm passionate about restorative justice and diversion. And we have a really robust restorative justice and diversion program with a 92% success rate. That means people complete restorative justice and diversion, and they don't go forward with the collateral consequences of having a criminal conviction.
Can you give listeners a quick 30-second? I know I was very blessed to be right next to Pete Lee when he was doing the first restorative justice bills in Colorado. Can you just define the restorative justice process for our listeners real quick?
Sure. So for our office, it's victim-centered. We only go through it if the victim's willing to do it, which often they are. So I'll actually use a case example to bring it to life. We had an assault on a police officer where by a young person, and the officer did not want to see the young person end up with a conviction. The officer wanted the person to accept responsibility, to recognize what they did. And from that conversation, which went on, we quickly realized that restorative justice would be the right approach. So we have community members. We have 70 volunteers from the community who help us with restorative justice. That's a force multiplier on top of our staff. And the officer and the young offender were brought together and had an incredibly powerful conversation, at the end of which the officer wanted the offender to apologize and repair the harm, help pay for medical bills and so on that had not yet been paid for, but then wanted the case dismissed. And now that young person gets to go on with their life, and the officer was incredibly fulfilled by and satisfied with that process. So that's a good case example of what we do over and over and over again in Boulder County to help people get back on the right track and not cycle in and out of the justice system over and over and over again. We also have a mental health diversion program for low-level offenders who are in a mental health crisis. We connect them with treatment in the community. We were the first program in the state of Colorado. That mental health diversion program has been incredibly successful and helped a lot of people, and at the same time helps with public safety. So I think that's one thing I would emphasize is when we're talking about criminal justice reform, we should always tie it back to, is this actually helping community safety? Because where I've seen us go too far, too fast in Colorado is when we enact criminal justice reform that is then perceived or actually having a negative impact on public safety. That's when we lose the support of the community. I believe the greatest risk to criminal justice reform is crime. So if we don't tie the public safety to criminal justice reform and help people understand why reentry programs from prison and jail, restorative justice and diversion programs, treating underlying trauma, underlying addiction, and identifying the root causes of what brings someone in, we're going to suffer and not have long-standing change when it comes to criminal justice reform. But on criminal justice reform, our office is usually the first one that legislators are going to call for input and perhaps support. We also, and this is an important point that I always want to stress, every criminal justice reform, every program we've put in place here in Boulder County, we've done it with the full support of law enforcement. I was once asked by reform-minded prosecutors at some conference in Chicago how I was able to overcome the resistance of law enforcement, and it took me a moment to realize I haven't had any resistance. We have really honest discussions with one another, the police chiefs, the sheriff, myself, our other law enforcement partners. But ultimately, if I can explain to them why it ties back to public safety, they've been fully supportive. And that means a lot. And what it means in reality is this past Monday out in Lafayette, the police chief and I appeared in front of 70 immigrants who are scared out of their minds right now. And we're talking about the immigrant protection program we have in Boulder County. And it means perhaps even more to them to have the police chief there than the district attorney to say, sure, if you're being pulled over, we're not going to report you to the federal government. So please pull over. You can go pay the ticket. You're not going to be reported. That kind of thing, that cooperation between law enforcement and our office. But it's really important to recognize the Attorney General is also responsible for the training of law enforcement all throughout the state of Colorado.
Huh.
That was part
of you do the post certification, right?
That's absolutely right. And that was part of my job when I was with the Attorney General's office as the head of the criminal section. And that knowledge and experience I'll bring with me back if I have the honor of being elected as Attorney General. And I think it's fair to say, and I think Phil Weiser would agree, we can do a lot to improve the training and resources for law enforcement. And then the last piece of this is holding law enforcement responsible when they fail or engage in criminal acts themselves. Our office has done that time and time and time again. One example I'll give you is Demetrius Shankling was a young man who was really intoxicated, and he was taken into custody so that he could be transported to basically a detox facility. And the sheriff's deputies who took him into custody treated him terribly, and as a result, he passed away due to their conduct. We prosecuted those two deputies. They were convicted after trial, and they're now both serving state prison sentences. So I've done that in case after case after case. That's part of criminal justice efforts too, holding everyone responsible and recognizing no one's above the law, whether you're talking about Donald Trump or a sheriff's deputy in Boulder County.
We've just got a couple more for you here. Attorney General Weiser's made consumer protection a key part of his office's work, from the Safeway Albertsons merger to suing Juul and Meta. Is that something that you think you will continue to emphasize if you're elected Attorney General, or do you have other priorities that would supersede those?
That is a top priority for me. I'm passionate about consumer protection, and I put it into 3 different buckets. First, we have too many scams and frauds that victimize people all the time.
If I get one more fucking voicemail from some scam artist talking about a $75,000 loan that I never
Those
applied
are me.
for.
That's me.
I legitimately want to know, can you do anything about the texts and the phone calls? Because I'm positive I'm not the only one, but I'm also positive that there are people who are not as sophisticated as I am that are getting taken in by this every day.
All the time. It's happening all the time. I will share with you, though, the other day I got a call from someone, same kind of scam, and I responded with, I'm running for Attorney General and I'd love to have your support. And for the first time ever, they hung up on me. Well, we ended up actually having a very funny conversation about it. I don't think he contributed, though, but the important part of that is those scam and frauds. I'm on the do not call list. I feel like I'm on the please call me with another scam list. So part of it's working with the phone providers to strengthen the protections we have for people. Another piece of it, and we've been really successful in Boulder County, I'm going to take this statewide, is raising awareness. So actually cutting down on how many people are falling for the scams and frauds, and then prosecuting them. And the Attorney General has jurisdiction over any criminal offense that takes place over county lines.
Right.
And I've prosecuted a ton of multi-jurisdictional cases in my career. That's how we should approach scams and frauds, and we need to be really aggressive about how we do that. The second piece of that, and this falls under consumer protection, is related to housing. So in 2022, the legislature gave the Attorney General the authority to go after unscrupulous landlords. So last year, my office, and I believe it's the first time in Colorado's history that a DA's office has done this, but we teamed up with the AG's office under that new authority to bring an action against a Boulder-based realty company that was preying upon college students, hundreds and hundreds of students, with deceptive and hidden fees, as well as holding back their security deposits. We took them to court and fought hard and got a $1 million settlement for all the victims, but also a model of going forward what we're going to hold landlords and realty companies to. And when you look at the struggle and crisis we have around affordable housing, we have to make sure unscrupulous landlords are being held responsible. And finally, just yesterday, I testified in support of a bill that will hold social media companies responsible when kids are being dealt drugs, guns, or sexually exploitative material. That's moving its way through the legislature. I hope it passes. I'm really committed to recognizing that guns and drugs are no longer being sold in alleyways and street corners. It's happening on social media. We have so many cases where kids are being preyed upon by older people who are selling them or bringing them into human trafficking operations. So that falls under consumer protection for me. That will definitely be a priority as Attorney General.
Finish this sentence. In July 2026, you will have won the Democratic nomination for Attorney General because
I've worked incredibly hard and covered the entire state of Colorado, answering questions honestly and truthfully, and gaining support based on my trial experience and leadership experience.
An efficient answer at that. You can visit michaelforag.com to learn more, but where else should people go to get more information, follow your campaign, or sign up to help?
So if they go to the website, they can contribute, they can volunteer, they can follow the campaign. I encourage people to do that. We're also on, of course, Facebook and Twitter and Blue Sky. We're going to be very accessible throughout this campaign. If people have questions, I encourage them to reach out to me. I will share with you that as district attorney, we have responded to every single email and every single phone call we receive from the public, because I do believe as a public servant, you're there to actually serve the public. So we're always going to continue to be really accessible, including during this campaign. I'm going to be covering the entire state. So I hope people will stay tuned into the campaign. And when I'm coming to your area, you come to me and let's have an honest conversation about the important and impactful role of the Attorney General in all the areas we've discussed here, also environmental protection, and most of all, standing up against Trump and Musk when they're harming Colorado.
Well, Michael Dougherty, Boulder's DA, and potentially Colorado's next AG, thank you so much for coming on the Get More Smarter podcast, spending time with us today. We really appreciate it. We wish you the best of luck.
This was wonderful. Thanks so much for having me on, and I look forward to seeing you both soon.
Thanks, Michael.
Same here. I do love that top cop framing, I gotta say.
Oh yeah, I'm a sucker for alliteration or quick rhyming like that.
Right, quick rhyming, like old school sounding political titles.
I don't know what is that. That's not alliteration. What do you call that? Top
It's
cop.
just a rhyme.
Just a rhyme?
Just a straight up rhyme. Top cop rhyme.
Top
yeah,
cop.
alliteration is when you have like assonants or consonants, so like the
Right.
same sound at the beginning.
I forget all what the words for all the. Sorry,
All the
English
words for the
teachers.
words. I forget the words about the words.
Yeah, fucking words. All right, well, let's start with government unfunding, I guess.
No funding.
No funding. No fun at all on the funding. Senate Democrats seemed prepared to force Republicans to shut down the federal government rather than accept their crappy funding proposal. We'll explain this in a minute, but here's Oregon Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley making the case on why he says he is a quote-unquote hell no on the proposal.
Set of primaries. We have to stand up to this authoritarian president now. And that means it would be an absolute sellout to vote for this Republican version of the world that gives more power to Trump. That's why we cannot do that. You don't stop a bully by handing over your lunch money, and you don't stop tyrant Trump by giving him more power.
Pretty clear.
Yeah, pretty clear. Both the Colorado senators announced they were opposed to a funding agreement. Here's Senator Michael Bennet saying, the Republican spending bill does not serve Coloradans well. Therefore, I will be voting no. In the coming days, I am committed to working across the aisle to finish the appropriations process and craft a bill that is a better deal for Colorado. Republicans knew they needed Democratic votes to pass their spending bill, but they refused to work with Democrats on a bipartisan deal to put American families first. Senator John Hickenlooper, meanwhile, said Wednesday during a virtual town hall meeting that he would vote against the bill and no on the Senate cloture motion. Remember, this needs 60 votes in the Senate to pass, not just a majority. Hickenlooper said, quote, the longer I look at it, this is a fundamental test of our democracy. We need a funding bill that preserves Congress's authority and, by extension, your voice, unquote.
He also made a pretty good Instagram video about this that I'll play right now. Hang on a sec.
Everybody's got long hair in the Senate now. What's going on?
Now we're on the brink of a government shutdown. The House Republicans passed a so-called continuing resolution to fund the government through September. The longer I look at it, this is a fundamental test of our democracy. So when this bill reaches the Senate floor, I will vote no. We need a funding bill that preserves Congress's authority and, by extension, your voice. I mean, our Constitution is clear. Congress holds the power of the purse. This bill would wipe out congressional oversight, letting Trump cut and redirect funding however he wants. That includes funding for Colorado, science, housing, veterans programs, on at his whim. Now, I'm not going to give President Trump more authority to undermine powers that rightly belong to Congress and to the people of Colorado. They put together this bill without any Democratic negotiation, no Democratic input whatsoever. While they were doing this, they knew that they don't have the votes to pass it. And that's just irresponsible. It led us to the brink of this shutdown. We have bipartisan appropriation bills that have been negotiated, came out of their committees with bipartisan majorities. But we're going to need Republicans to join us.
Like, again, very clear. Like, very, very clear. Don't vote for this thing. We have leverage. We're in the minority, but we have some leverage. There's something we can do. We can say, no, we're not going to give you the votes that you need to pass this thing. You need to come back to the table and give us some things. And an easy thing to ask for, a very easy thing to ask for, stop this Doge bullshit.
Right.
Stop Musk from taking a chainsaw to the government. You want to negotiate on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. I don't think Democrats should give an inch on that, but that's where the spending is. You want to negotiate on defense. That's where the spending is. You want to have a real budget and a real spending proposal? Go ahead. You're going to go ahead and just hand Trump everything he wants. House Judiciary Republicans are taking fucking victory laps over this on Twitter. Like, how do you know you're on the wrong side when your opponents are celebrating before you even actually cave?
So what happened then, after all this, is that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, well, caved. He said he's going to vote for it, which sort of indicates that there are enough Democrats to pass it.
Schumer's shutdown surrender. Good. See, that's alliteration. Consonants specifically. It all comes back around.
Call
Jason.
back, baby.
Yeah.
Schumer's arguments anyway, were that a shutdown would play into Trump and Musk's hands by allowing them to cut more programs and jobs. I don't know if that's
There's
true
actually
or
an
not.
argument for this. Like if they had a caucus meeting a couple weeks ago and they were like, hey, they're going to bring us to the brink of a shutdown. We have two roads in front of us. We can either unite and fight like hell against it, all vote no, and shut the government down and show people what it means to do what they want to do and really make them, unfortunately, have to feel some pain. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know if it's a bad idea. That's one option. Option two was we will make the case to the American public that we have to vote for this thing. Otherwise, they're going to get everything they want. Elon Musk wants to shut down the government. This gives him everything he wants. Donald Trump wants to destroy the government. This gives him everything we want. That's why we're going to vote yes on this, but we're going to extract some concessions elsewhere or do something else. Neither one of those messages happened at the same time, which is partially why we're here.
Right. And Schumer's other point was that essentially the Democrats need to be the adults in the room, which I'm sensitive to, but I'm tired of that. And in this case, Republicans would own the shutdown.
They're in charge of every branch of government, like I said in the intro, and I think most Americans know that.
I saw some polling showing that Democrats maybe would get some blame. I have trouble really buying that because Americans have been watching the Trump administration decimate the federal government for 2 months now. They're not going to suddenly be like, oh, it's Democrats.
Yeah, and it's also like the American public would have a hard time, I think, holding two views at the same time, which is like these cuts or these federal workforce layoffs or reductions in government are somehow good, but also it's bad when Democrats shut down the government. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Doesn't add up.
No. And so as we're recording, this vote hasn't happened yet. Maybe
it's probably going to happen
something
tonight.
will change. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's Friday when we're recording, so chances are this may be old news by the time you hear it, but
hopefully everything we just said is irrelevant and Democrats say no and negotiate, but we'll see.
Again, like, there's real pain. Like, the NIH research would stop. Like, air traffic controllers are essential employees, but they're already having a hard time staffing them.
Nobody wants to do it.
Right. But, like, this is one of the few tools of leverage Democrats have to actually get something, and they're not using it to get anything. They're using it to give these guys what they want. And it's not live to fight another day. It's live to do nothing another day. That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
the House held together. It's actually important to mention this. The House held together. Only one House Democrat voted for this thing. Everybody else, including Brittany and the guy from California who is still like recovering from surgery, flew there and voted no. Right? Brittany brought Sam back to D.C. again last week. That was fun. Or this week, earlier. Jeez, time warp. But, like, that's what you do. You unite and you have a message. And Hakeem Jeffries and Catherine Clark and Pete Aguilar, the top three in the House, all put out a statement that was like, no, we're not going along with this. We're not going to let them continue to destroy the government. And then Schumer goes ahead and pulls this after the worst part is that he pulled the rug out. Because earlier in the week, he was like, Senate Democrats aren't giving them the votes they need. And then on Thursday, he goes, just kidding, yes, we are.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if there is further reporting next week about what if anything, changed. Like,
it just feels like he blinked. I mean, it feels like it's that simple.
But I don't know. But why? I don't know why. That's what I mean.
The threat of federal workers getting furloughed when one of your main messages is these guys are trying to destroy the federal workforce.
Yeah.
Like, I get that. But again, like, you could have thought about this a couple weeks ago instead of flip-flopping all over the place and then ending in the wrong spot.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is, you and I both try to not go overboard and getting on this left-wing attack on Democrats all the time. But this is a hard one to defend.
Yeah, it's just bad strategy. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you don't have to like the chess player to understand that their game is bad at any given moment.
Hey, it's a solid analogy.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Donald Trump.
And all this is happening under the background of Trump getting the worst poll of his administration so far. This is the other confusing thing. You're essentially throwing in with a guy who's collapsing under the weight of his own bad decisions and his own unpopular policies. This week, a polling outfit that I actually haven't heard of called SSRS, and I've heard of lots of polling firms. And CNN put out a continuation of a continuing survey they've been doing for a very long time, apparently. This was conducted between March 6th and 9th, so a little over a week old, with a sample of 1,206 respondents. It's a pretty high number, or an N, as they call it in
that's standard
industry. It's national, so you want at least 800 to 1,000 to get a good sample. But the interesting things here are, the first question is, do you approve or disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling his job as president? They did the same survey the week of February 13th, the week of February 24th, and now the week of March 6th. On 13th, he was still in the honeymoon phase with 47% approving and only 52% disapproving. Now it's 45 to 54. So that doesn't necessarily feel like a big jump, but it went from a 5-point gap of 47 to 52 to a 9-point gap of 45
in a short
to
period
54.
of time.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah.
People are paying attention. When you keep asking the questions further down, what's really interesting, though, is there's intensity under the surface here. If you ask strongly, approve moderately, disapprove strongly, or disapprove moderately, the net approves at 45% are broken down into 26% who strongly approve and only 18 who approve moderately. So 26%, there's your MAGA base. Anything Trump does is perfect and great no matter what.
Right.
It's the strong disapproves that are really driving the interest here. 41% of respondents, that's almost twice as much as those who say they approve strongly disapprove. Of this, only 1% say they have no opinion. So that is really interesting. You were having this anti-MAGA plurality in this poll of 41% forming very strong opinions.
Yep.
It's only 9 points to a majority of strong disapproval there. That's really interesting. Going down, asking about Trump some of his strongest issues, like the economy. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling the economy? March 6th to 9th, 2025, we don't have any other answers to this question from this term. We do have it at the end of last term, but it's kind of irrelevant. Only 44% approving with 56% disapproving. That is a catastrophic 12-point gap. On the issue he is one of the strongest on, right? Healthcare policy, only 43% approve, 56% disapprove. Going to immigration, his other quote-unquote strongest issue. Now, the last time this question was asked was in January of 2021, and he was in the toilet with 61% disapproving, 36% approving. I almost forget what was driving those numbers back there. But even on his very strongest issue, which was the thing that essentially won him this election, whether you agree with him or not, and we do not agree with him on immigration, 51% approve, 48% disapprove. He only has a 3-point positive margin, which is well within this survey's 3% margin of error, of course. And then foreign affairs, 42% approve, 58% disapprove. Federal budget, 48% approve, 52% disapprove. I have a feeling that number's going to start separating a lot faster soon.
Yep.
Management of the federal government, 48% approve, 51% disapprove. And tariffs, this is so interesting, 61% disapprove of tariffs.
People are figuring out tariffs. They're really
approve.
getting it. And that's really bad news for Trump, as we'll talk about more in a moment here. The other good news, if you're not a Trump fan, is, and I imagine you're not if you're listening to us, federal judges.
There's a couple. We have a couple Republican listeners that listen to us to hate us.
Well, that's nice. So you really hate us now. 2 different federal judges, one in California and one in Maryland, have demanded that the Trump administration stop its mass firings and immediately rehire fired workers. Here's CBS News.
A federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to reinstate probationary workers let go in mass firings across multiple agencies. Let's bring in CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen.
Like
Jake, tell us what happened here.
Well, that's right. There was a hearing today in a lawsuit filed by a bunch of union groups representing these government workers who have sued the Office of Personnel Management, which was the group of government or the government agency which led the charge on firing a lot of these probationary workers. And in the hearing today, it was expected that potentially the acting head of the OPM would show up and give testimony. That did not happen, and the hearing devolved after the government and the government attorney who was arguing basically did not have many answers. So the judge at the end of the hearing ruled told that the firings were illegal, that OPM did not have the authority to do that, and that in the 6 agencies, which includes the Department of Defense, Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Agriculture, Interior, Energy, and Treasury, are all ordered to be offered to be reinstated. Now, that offer is obviously complicated because a lot of these people have turned in their government devices. There are no offices for a lot of these people to go to, especially in the case of some of these groups who have had their offices shut down or who were told to not go to work. But we'll have to see exactly how this is implemented. But this impacts thousands of government employees across the government who were sued. These are probationary employees who were working for the government for less than a year.
Oh, employees still have rights in this country. That's good.
Well, for now, because the White House and the Trump administration is apparently going to fight this. And here's the batshit argument from White House Press Secretary Catherine Leavitt.
She really is something, this one.
Yeah.
Get an update on it.
District Court rulings about all the fired probationary workers use the same language.
Really got the duck face going.
Fighting back against that ruling. Do you mean appealing or something else? And does the administration plan to comply with those orders in the meantime?
Fighting back by appealing, fighting back by using the full weight of the White House counsel's office and our lawyers at the federal government who believe that this injunction is entirely unconstitutional. And it is, for anybody who has a basic understanding of the law. You cannot have a low-level district court judge filing an injunction to usurp the executive authority of the president of the United States. That is completely absurd. And as the executive of the executive branch has the ability to fire or hire, and you have these lower level judges who are trying to block this president's agenda, it's very clear. And as I just cited, I was appalled by the statistic when I saw it this morning. In 1 month in February, there have been 15 injunctions of this administration in our agenda. In 3 years under the Biden administration, there were 14 injunctions. So it's very clear that there are judicial activists throughout our judicial branch who are trying to block this president's executive authority. We are going to fight back. And as anyone who saw President Trump and his legal team fighting back, they know how to do it. He was indicted nearly 200 times, and he's in the Oval Office now because all of the indictments, all of these injunctions have always been unconstitutional and unfair. They are led by partisan activists who are trying to usurp the will of this president, and we're not going to stand for it.
Except for the indictments that led to dozens of felonies.
Right. It's unconstitutional for one of the branches of government to do what it's supposed to do. Okay. And the reason there's been 15 injunctions is because you keep doing illegal shit. It's not.
They're
not like preemptive injunctions.
They're getting their asses kicked in all of these courts. I mean, it's really wild to make the claim that you have such a stellar legal team when you just fucking lose case after case.
Right. I mean, it's again. This is. We talked about this a little bit with Michael Dougherty earlier. That the real scary part will be if the White House tries to just ignore the courts. I mean, at least for now, they're saying, "Oh, it's unconstitutional," and we're going to fight it in court. But if they keep losing, I don't know.
And all this chaos, all this nonsense, all this insanity was supposed to be worth it, right? Because Donald Trump was supposed to make things cheaper, supposed to drive down egg prices, your portfolio was going to look great, the stock market was going to have this huge rally, hell, even crypto was going to fly through the ceiling.
Yeah,
and all that's happening, right?
Well, you know, more or less, with emphasis on the less.
And no emphasis on the more.
Here's Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear on CNN.
Rural health decimate rural health care. Between Trump and Musk, I'm not sure which one's Thelma and which one is Louise, but our economy is that car, and they are driving it off the cliff.
That's a statement Paul Begala is laughing at, I should note. But on what Trump was...
That's good.
Is Caitlin Collins old enough to get the Thelma and Louise reference?
Yeah, probably. For a little more on what's going on, here's MSNBC from Thursday.
What the conservative-leaning Wall Street Journal has called the, quote, dumbest trade war in history has put Republican elected officials between a rock and a hard place, politically speaking. The problem stemming entirely from their relentless blind loyalty to Donald Trump and all of his inane policies. On one side, a president who lives on Earth 2, seemingly undeterred by the damage his tariffs are doing to the American people and the American economy. Undeterred by the markets tanking again, the Dow falling about 500 points today.
Washington Post on Friday could have been renamed Recession Watch with all the stories about it. Here's one quote from David Miracle, chief U.S. economist at Goldman Sachs. Quote, if we get the impression that they're moving ahead with even larger tariffs than we now expect, or if the White House just signaled that it's really committed to its policies, even in the face of weaker economic data, either of those developments might imply that the recession probability is higher. Not good.
Again, the whole argument for all the bullshit was supposed to be, but the economy is going to be good. And now it's so much fucking worse than it was when Biden was president.
JP Morgan has raised its recession odds to 40%. But don't listen to these crazy liberals. Here's President Trump himself on Fox.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing.
But first,
and there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time. But I think it should be great for us. I mean, I think it should be great.
So was
just fucking take his word for it. That's that'll send the kids to college.
The best way to improve the economy and to build up the economic numbers is to tank them first. Then you can say, look how much we've grown.
I actually don't dispute that as one of their potential central theories.
It's just he's going off the rails though on the tariff thing. And
He's
pretty
a true
soon
believer, man. He really thinks like William McKinley was the greatest American president besides him.
I guess. Pretty soon it's going to be too expensive even to drown your sorrows about Trump's economy. Here's Chris Hayes of MSNBC.
Canada and the EU responded to Trump's tariffs by imposing new taxes on U.S. exports, including on signature American products like whiskey and motorcycles. When Trump heard about that retaliation, he basically lost it, made this totally unhinged social media post in the middle of the night, quote, the European Union, one of the most hostile and abusive taxing and tariffing authorities in the world, which has formed for the sole purpose of taking advantage of the United States, has put a nasty 50% tariff on whiskey. If this tariff is not removed immediately, the U.S. will shortly place a 200% tariff on all wine, champagnes, alcoholic products coming out of France and other EU-represented countries. This will be great for the wine champagne businesses in the U.S.
Either he says this next or everyone else has already pointed out that there is no champagne business in the U.S. because that is not possible. We perhaps have a sparkling wine industry.
Trump is just like, Trump responded by saying, we're going to put a 200% tariff on those goods from the EU. 1,000,000% tariff on whatever comes from Australia, or I don't know.
I mean, like when a normal person goes to the liquor store to like buy a bottle to celebrate, and they're greeted with like a literal 3 times price increase on the thing that they were like, they're gonna be pissed, and they know who they're gonna be pissed at.
Yeah,
it's not gonna be fucking Joe Biden.
No, and this whole idea, and Trump just keeps like lying to try to make this look better. He said in a Truth Social post that egg prices are down. They're actually up 10% in the last month.
Another 10%.
Yeah, another 10%. I mean, it's just, I don't know if he really thinks he can lie his way out of this.
I think he thinks that he can shape reality by talking, and I think we know that 23-ish% of people will believe anything he says.
Right. But then he's got the other, 67% who are pretty pissed.
It was super annoying that like up to 51% believed his bullshit again last November, and here we fucking are. Having tried to tell everyone what was going to happen, and having been right, unfortunately, about pretty much all of it.
Cracks are also showing elsewhere in the Trump administration. The White House this week withdrew the nomination of Dr. Dave Weldon.
Did you hear about this?
Yeah.
It happened on the way to the committee hearing. He was walking to his confirmation hearing, and he got the message, sorry, pal, it's over.
You're not going to be the CDC director.
Okay, how fucking crazy do you have to be to not get confirmed when your competition was Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., who all passed the test, but somehow this guy fails?
I think what's happening is that there are some Republicans like Susan Collins of Maine, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who's a doctor. They're finally kind of going, well, maybe we should have people who actually know what they're doing in some of these jobs.
But then why confirm RFK? Look, I
agree.
This
But
freak
I think
isn't in charge of the CDC. But Jesus Christ,
if the measles outbreak in West Texas had happened a little sooner, it probably would have tanked RFK. I think it probably tanked this guy.
Does it really? Is this like nature's immune system just like coming in? Is this like it's the universe trying to warn us? It was just a couple weeks too late.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when people say, "I'm waiting for God to send me a message," and you keep getting like all these.
There's that old joke,
messages.
Right? the guy on the roof during the hurricane. He says, "Lord, please send me some help. I need to survive this hurricane." Radio goes on. It says, "There's some emergency people coming in 20 minutes. Be outside." 20 minutes later, the boat comes, and the guy goes, "No, I'm waiting for the Lord to save me." The boat goes away. 20 minutes later, a helicopter comes. He says, "Get on." He says, "No, I'm waiting for the Lord to save me." He dies in the flood, goes to heaven, says, "God, I prayed. I was the best believer I could be. Why did you leave me to languish?" And he says, "I sent you a radio, a boat, and a helicopter, you dumbass."
That's really kind of what's happening.
That's exactly what's happening.
Medicaid cuts are still a big issue, and they're coming now for Colorado Republicans. We've talked before about how Gabe Evans, congressman from the 8th Congressional District, is on the committee that's going to have to make Medicaid cuts.
Hey, look, your website's working again.
Hey, yeah, look at that. And Colorado Polls got some sort of a bot attack this morning.
We were cyber attacked for criticizing Elon Musk.
Yeah, probably. Bread Sandwich is in trouble. Jeff Hurd, the 3rd Congressional District Republican, who literally campaigned in 2014, there was an ad that he ran saying that he would expand healthcare access for rural Colorado.
And by expand, he means contract.
Yes. He said the opposite of that. He, in a teletown hall meeting, he was trying to explain why he voted for the budget bill that is going to decimate Medicaid, and said he's committed to protecting it for those who need it most, the working poor, mothers, pregnant women, children. But I guess he's going to now decide who doesn't need Medicaid of the 58,000 people in his district who use it or CHIP. I don't see how this works for him. I mean,
I don't think this is why he went to Congress, man. I think he's going to fucking flip. I don't think this is what he wants to be doing out there. He didn't even use the waste, fraud, and abuse lie, which is like the lie you're supposed to use when you are confronted with the reality of what's going to happen in your district. He says, "Oh, I'm just going to make sure it's for those who need it most." And it's like, no one fucking voted for you to be in charge of who lives and dies, Jeff Hurd. And that's
right.
I don't agree with this guy on a lot of stuff. I don't think this is why he went to Congress.
No, and I think they all went along with the budget bill. They were strong-armed into doing it, and boy, the regret is really.
But it's also really interesting because like that budget bill, from what I understand, just kind of sets the level of spending. Like the actual committee bills that come after are going to prescribe the cuts, and that's when we're going to see people fucking running for the hills or just retiring early because they cannot. Your political career, if you're Gabe Evans, if you're Jeff Hurd, even if you're Jeff Crank, might not be able to survive a vote like that.
It shouldn't.
And for good reason. Right, exactly.
It shouldn't.
Right.
Over at the state legislature, Colorado Republicans have, they've long ago ceded the pro-family narrative, but they keep doing it. And year after year, on one piece of legislation after another, they go out of their way to oppose something that would benefit Colorado families. Fortunately, a Democratic trifecta ignores them and passes it anyway. They did it again this week, staging a mini filibuster against a bill that would require child care centers to provide a transparent fee schedule and refund application fees and waitlist fees if you don't give a response within 6 months.
This is actually really important for lots of families. Colorado has very long waiting lists. We do not have enough child care centers or providers in the state at all whatsoever. And people just kind of lose money trying to like when we had Davis 5 years ago, and there were no slots available anywhere in Jeffco at all. We put a bunch of money down that we just never saw again in a bunch of different places. Finally, he got into one when everybody was pulling their kids out during the pandemic in October of 2020. But like, still, it's insane. Like, regular people can't afford to do that.
Republicans
and why,
are saying,
why is this the hill they die on? This is insane. Like, big child care center junk fees is like their big fucking...
They're saying it's government overreach to force child care facilities to give you back your money if they don't provide the service you paid for. It makes no sense. I mean,
is this just like... Yeah.
These are the same people that tried to stop the wildly popular universal preschool program. Colorado voters voted for it overwhelmingly on the ballot, and then they still voted against the bill to create the program the next session.
Sure, why not?
What the hell are they doing?
Well, we don't have
I
this
don't
in this
understand.
episode, but Kyle Clark, friend of the pod, Kyle Clark interviewed Darcy Schoening, one of the potential... was it her? I think it was her.
Yeah.
One of the chair people for the Colorado Republican Party. There's a section of this that is like very illustrative as to like why Republicans have lost Colorado and will not be winning it anytime soon, where she just like goes after all public schools. She still maintains that the thing that she wants conservative parents in Colorado to do is pull all their kids out of public school because they're being indoctrinated. I think this might be part of that. Big preschool, even though the vast majority of them are private, big liberal indoctrination program, private preschool in Colorado.
That vote for state party chair is coming up at the end of the month. Next week, we'll take you through the group of people who are competing for the worst job in Colorado.
It is the worst job in Colorado, currently being done by the worst person in Colorado, and I do not know why anybody would want to try and clean up this particular mess.
No. All right, let's do a couple of quick hits, and then we'll get out of here. Our newest feature, the FAFO of the week, the Fuck Around and Find Out, is getting really hard to choose between.
Yeah, a lot of people have fucked around, and a lot of them are finding out, unfortunately.
They are indeed. This week we've got two. The first one comes from the Washington Post via a banker from the Financial Times who says, quote, "With hindsight, we did not appreciate the nature of what the administration was going to be like. I do believe they are hurting their stated objectives of peace and prosperity." No shit.
Trump's closest allies and advisors are simply rattled, spooked, and unnerved by the president's destructive decisions. The left-wing Wall Street Journal reports.
Yeah, right.
Catherine
The
Rampell is a great
rag
columnist.
Wall Street Journal now.
She's a great columnist for the Washington Post. She's got a story on MSNBC coming up now. Really excited to see that. But that's FAFO 1. FAFO 2 comes to us from the great state of North Dakota, where Donald Trump won a commanding victory, and the farmers are starting to wonder if this whole tariff thing was such a good idea.
America.
How do you operate a business that way?
Up until just days ago, Sherlock says, farmers had Association sailed to the Pacific Northwest, then shipped to China. Except nothing is typical or certain today.
And things are changing hour by hour. How do you operate a business that way?
Up until just days ago, Sherlock says, farmers had still hoped President Trump was using tariffs to negotiate. But now it just feels chaotic. 1 minute they're on, then they're off, then one thing is exempted, then a post on Truth Social that American farmers should get ready to supply America, ending with, quote, "have fun."
This notion of have fun and kind of, that really struck a lot of farmers. It was the wrong note. I think it has a lot of them questioning, is there a plan?
Like so.
No, there's not a plan.
Are you going to make the joke or am I?
Go, please.
There's no plan. No shit, Sherlock.
All we can do at this point is laugh at it, but it's just like none of this is a surprise. None of it.
Nope. Told you. Sorry.
Donald Trump bought a Tesla, I guess. Here's the Daily Show.
Yeah, because I asked Tom Popinski on Blue Sky, friend of the pod. Go back and listen to that episode again, by the way. Dude was right about absolutely everything. I asked Tom Popinski, what phase of oligarchy, kleptocracy, or fascism is hawking your biggest donor's product on the White House lawn?
Which one is it?
He said he responded and said in I think month 3 they would have these like celebratory days where everybody would like celebrate the currency and like go spend money. So it's phase one. The Daily Show made a little ad celebrating, commemorating this sales job. Take a look.
Tesla. Going on now at the White House Tesla Auto Mall. It's the biggest sale of the year.
It's safe. It's very strong, heavy. It's all steel, stainless steel.
Come on down to Pennsylvania Avenue, just off Route 29, to get our best deal ever on a brand new Tesla.
I want to make a good deal here. They have one, which is $35,000, which is pretty low.
Get a Model 1 with a different panel and everything's computer.
This is a different panel than I've had. Everything's computer.
Don't waste your time going to those other Tesla dealerships with riots and flaming Cybertrucks. You gotta come down to White House Tesla Auto Mall.
I love Tesla.
You gotta come down to White House Tesla Auto Mall.
This is really amazing. Tesla.
They still got it over there at the Daily Show.
Tesla's stock, of course, is tanking, so I guess they figured this would help. Trump doesn't drive. He hasn't driven, I don't think, ever.
Well, good news. He can use Tesla's full self-driving to die in a fire.
Where are they going to put this? Are they just going to leave it?
Park it on the lawn, baby.
Just leave it there? There are going to be Teslas on blocks on the White House lawn soon.
It's the most crooked, self-dealing, corrupt administration in history, and it's not fucking close.
We've got some good news. We've got an update on Congresswoman of the show, Brittany Petterson's resolution. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, there she is with some unusual suspects. Anna Paulina Luna, who wants to put Trump's face on Mount Rushmore. Sarah Jacobs from California, who's pretty awesome in a lot of ways. And Mike Lawler, who apparently might want to be the next governor of New York, a Republican, all teamed up as new parents to try and help Brittany pass her proxy voting resolution. And they pulled a maneuver that we've been kind of previewing on the show for a little while, called a discharge petition, where they had enough votes, 218 signatures. So every House Democrat and then about 10 or so House Republicans signed on to move this forward, rolling Mike Johnson and forcing a vote on the floor. It has to sit for 7 legislative days. So next week is a recess week. The week after that will be 5 days, and then 2 more days after that until it is brought up for a vote, and it will apparently pass. The U.S. House of Representatives now. This would give new parents up to 12 weeks of proxy voting. Sam is 6 weeks old. By the time this is over, it will have been 8 or 9 weeks. So it's not like she gets to take advantage of it in any meaningful way.
But she's
this
doing
is
the
good
right
for,
thing to push it. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's good for any future young person or family who wants to be in Congress for some reason.
And the this was all necessary to get around the pro-family House Republican Party.
The most pro-family speaker the United States House of Representatives has ever seen, Mike Johnson, who hates families, especially young ones.
Right. And finally, our gibberish of the week. I didn't preview this one for you, Ian, because I just wanted to see if you got the fun part. Here's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on Fox News.
Before I hit play, please keep trotting this guy out. He has like used car salesman vibes all over the place. Everything he says seems like a scam. So I would really like them to continue to let him talk, but let's see what he says.
Welcome to the story.
Great to be here today.
Good to see you. So what about that? You said on CBS that President Trump wants no taxes on people making below $150,000 annually. And our sources are saying that the Treasury Department doesn't have any plan to put that into action.
No, that's taking it out of context. What we discussed was when the president balances the budget, his first move is going to be, he has suggested that he would like to waive taxes for people under $150,000. That's aspirational, that when we balance the budget. And let me tell you, he's got a plan to balance this budget.
When we balance the budget.
Unfucking believable.
Never been done.
Well,
in the
Clinton, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Clinton had a balanced budget and a surplus, and it hasn't been done since like 1996.
Yeah, not going to happen, especially, well, maybe you can balance the budget with 1,000,000% tariffs on everything. We'll find out. I'm guessing
we'll find
not.
out. Doesn't seem likely.
That's it for us this week.
The Get More Smarter podcast is a production of ColoradoPolls.com and the Big Horn Company. Your hosts are me, Ian Silveri, and America's dad,
Jason Babe,
who managed to figure out how to engineer and produce this thing. I make the video version sometimes. Jason's been doing it. Megan's been doing it. Everybody's been doing it. Thanks, Jason and Megan. Breakmaster Cylinder made the theme song. Get your shots while you still can. No, really, they're canceling the fucking flu shot. It's not good. Our review this week comes from Del Dev, a 5-star review called Entertaining with Great Guests. Reading the reviews here was almost as fun as listening to the show. Jason, Ian, and their guests make me laugh as I walk our dogs. It's great to hear from well-known people in our state in different, more entertaining roles. Thanks, Del! What a great review! If you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, a comment on Spotify, or reply to a post on Blue Sky, or just email or text us, we'll read it on the air, usually. Get us at Ian@GetMoreSmarter.com.
It's hard.
Jason, I know, it's great. Keep them coming, though. We're going to read them. We're going to put them on the show. We're going to respond to them. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get the podcast. Rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you got More Smarter, because it helps us a lot. Find us at GetMoreSmarter.com, where you can sign up for bonus content that I promise I will start writing again really soon. Please send all your angry rants to angryrants@GetMoreSmarter.com. And thanks so much to DA Michael Dougherty for joining us this week as our guest. And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.